Okay, so it's kind of an overcast day, not ideal for plein air painting, but a good day to do some research. So when the weather is not great, I like to do a deep dive into sort of trouble areas or certain things that give me or that challenge me. Wet sand is one of those things, so we're going to talk about that today. Not only are we going to talk about the different elements, or the different components of wet sand or things you should look for, but this is also sharing how I go about self-educating. And I've talked about that in previous videos. I think education and workshops can be great, but at a certain point, the way you grow as a painter is just by observing more acutely and really honing your observational skills. It's all about seeing. And I think the longer I paint, the more I see. And how I see more is by doing things like what we're doing today, which is going to be a deep dive into wet sand. All right, so there's a couple things to look for with wet sand. And the first thing that I notice is that there are no hard edges. Okay, so let's start with dry sand right here, this, to the left. And then it usually goes to sort of a darker, the sand is darker where it meets the wet sand. And usually what I notice is it tends to be kind of a purplish color. So whatever your sand color is, there tends to be some sort of purple or red in it. And it's slightly darker in value. And then when it becomes wet, it starts reflecting the sky. Or typically it'll reflect the sky. Here in this case, it's reflecting this rock. And we'll talk about the reflections in a second. But the key thing here is that, well, there's a kind of a hard edge right here. But for the most part, look at how soft all of these edges are. This transition from dry sand to the half wet to the wet sand, that transition, very, very soft edges, no hard edges there. Now let's talk about the reflections. Also in the reflections, no hard edges, right? And then also look at the values. What I've noticed is that the values in the reflection tend to be more, there's a narrow value range. So in other words, you've got these lights up here on this rock. Those values are going to be, they're not going to be as light. It's going to be, everything is closer to a middle value. The reflection is a mixture of, the object that's being reflected. You're also going to get the color of the sand or whatever that's under the water. I hope that makes sense. So this color right here is a mixture of sand color and the object, the rock, which is being reflected. So, and you see that here as well. All right, so what do we got so far? We've got soft edges, soft transitions, and look at these edges right here where it's reflected. You've got ripples that are, so the edge of the reflection is broken up by these ripples, right? And here it's really broken up. Now the next thing is which direction should we do brush strokes here, right? Because I like to paint with visible brush strokes. So these look like vertical brush strokes to me. And most of the time, reflected objects, it just seems like vertical brush strokes work the best. So you would do vertical brush strokes, and then this portion, the reflected sky, I don't see any real direction. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll do the direction of the flow that I feel like the water is, if the water is flowing onto the beach. And then, I'll create directional brushwork and then come across with ripples across the top. So it's this play of, of different directions in the brush strokes. Let's look at some other pictures. Same thing here. You've got the transition, from dry sand to wet sand. Again, there's this kind of reddish purple color in here. All the edges are soft. And then the reflections here, again, like I said, the reflection tends to go towards mid-tone. So your darks are not as dark and your lights are not as light. And then it's also picking up some of the color so it's a mixture of what is being reflected and then the color of the sand as well. So you can see that the rock is redder and warmer, and then the reflection is it's slightly darker, but it also is picking up some of this sand color, if you can see that in there. So it's a combination of the two. Okay, what else? Let's look at another picture. Here again, the transitions are all very soft transitions. Okay, this cliff right here is reflected. Again, it's more towards a middle value. These dark trees are reflected, more towards a middle value. And again, brush strokes, I would go vertical with these brush strokes and then maybe horizontal with the blue, keeping these edges soft. This could be an opportunity to talk about a harder edge. And that's where the white water starts rolling over. Then you get some harder edges. A lot of times right along the leading edge of the white water, there'll be a little dark shadow underneath that water that's rolling in. Here's another reflection to look at. Again, look at the transition from dry sand to wet sand. Again, there's that little bit of darkness along the transition, but soft edges. Brush strokes, you could go vertical with these. The brush strokes here would definitely go in this direction, kind of at an angle. Which is great because it creates some motion. Let's look at some paintings by myself and Marcia Burt, just because I know Marcia Burt paints a lot of seascapes. Transition from dry to wet looks good. Definitely soft edge there. There's no real reflections here except for the reflected white water, and it looks like she did do a little bit of vertical in there. On this one, it's like more of a horizontal. Vertical kind of strokes on these waves out here, actually vertical right in here too. And then did she break it up with some, yeah, broke it up a little bit with some horizontal strokes. This one, yep, your transition, soft transition, that's nice. And again, where the white water starts rolling over the wet sand, then you can have a hard line. Oh, right here, you notice she put, that dark line under the leading edge of the white water. And notice this right here. This is a little bit of reflected white water. These little touches add to this feeling the sand is wet because it's reflective. Here's one I did. And yeah, the transition, from sand to, that's a good soft transition. Let's see if there's a better example. Here's another one. The transition here is soft as well. So that's good. Yep, good soft transition there. This dark passage here is seaweed. This is good here too. This is nice and soft. Okay, on this one here, a little hard edge there, but it's not so bad. Good soft edges. And I guess this could be a little softer. Yeah, that's a little bit of hard edge there. So are these here. Oh, that's another thing. Like the value, I think the value transition is a little bit too, there's too much of a value transition there as well. Whereas when it's more of a temperature shift as opposed to a value shift, I think that's actually better. In real life, it is darker, but that value shift is very delicate. And I'm talking about the transition area where it's kind of reddish or more purple, where it's transitioning from dry sand to wet sand. All right, hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this art of observation. And I'd like to remind you, you can do a deep dive into any subject that's giving you trouble. So if trees are giving you trouble, drag and drop some paintings of trees and some photographs and really take a close look and figure out, what's going on, things you need to look for so that when you are out painting from life or out plein air painting, you have a clear understanding of the anatomy of a tree or the anatomy of white water or the anatomy of waves or anything. All right, so if you'd like to see more videos, I've got over 125 extra videos on my Patreon channel, and it does support this channel. It supports me making these videos, so there's a link down below if you'd like to check that out. Other than that, stay creative, and I'll see you guys in the next video.